In this series about polarization, in the last video I looked at a particular polarity which was subjective-objective. I point out that's a very important one because, just going back in the history of humankind, it's agreed facts that we call objective facts that other people agree with. It's very important for keeping people together and for protection. You all agree if there's a threat and you act on it. But that's very clear. But the problem is, how many people does it take to be sure that it's an agreed fact? Well, in theory, just one other person, then it must be objectively true. But in fact, it's a personal decision, really. If I say something, how many people do I have agreeing with me before I feel confident that I've found an objective truth? So that's rather ironical, isn't it, that here we are looking for the ultimate sign of objective truth, and we're actually having to make a subjective decision of whether we've got there or not. It sort of muddies the water a bit. Now, in this video, therefore, I want to look at the boundary between inner and outer to try to decide, where the decision takes place. What is the decision? And to illustrate that, I'm going to show you a picture which was a very famous picture in the past, and a lot of people of my generation like it very much. And it's this picture. Now, I found it on the internet when I put in the query in Google, self-portrait of Martin Escher with a mirror ball. And it must be quite a good description because straight away it came up, this picture appeared. But it's not quite true. There's something tricky about this picture. Martin Escher isn't in the picture. Well, even that statement isn't quite true because a hand is there, which must be his hand. But you don't see Martin Escher. What you see is a distorted reflection of him, which isn't the same as a portrait of Martin Escher. And yet, it's accurate, the information there, because if Martin Escher walked into the room, you'd immediately recognize him from that picture. In fact, all the information in the room is really reflected in a crystal ball, a mirror ball. Now, you see, you can't do it in this picture because it's just made of pixels. But if you actually held that mirror ball up in that room and you had a magnifying glass, you could read the titles of these books in the mirror. All the information is there, and it's extraordinary because it's as though the whole room, the whole experience of the room is captured in a ball you can just hold in your hand. But really, that's nothing, because if you took that same ball up to the top of a very tall tower on a clear, cloudless night with all the stars visible, all those stars in the universe would be reflected into that ball. Every single photon coming from distant space would bounce off the surface and leave its imprint in that ball. So it's as though the whole universe is compressed and contained in a ball you can just hold in your hand, which is an extraordinary thought. And yet, it's really what the brain does. All my life's experience, and as I sit here, I look around me, I can feel things, I can touch things, I can see colours, I can hear sounds. All that is compressed and recorded in the brain in a distorted form, probably. And my whole life is worked like that. So my brain is behaving a bit like that mirror ball. Everything out there is reflected and compressed into it. Now that's a one-way thing. What's out there is reflected into the ball. But on the other hand, it could be the other way round in some circumstances. We have this very vivid sense of, I reach out and touch something and it's solid and I can feel its weight and I can hear it twittering or whatever it does, and I can see it. Now all those impressions actually are only transmitted into the brain as electrical signals along nerves. And yet the brain gives us this feeling of this rich, tangible experience. Now that seems like pretty good confirmation that what it's seeing is what is really out there. What it's experiencing, I should say, is what is really out there. But, as I pointed out in my video about is reality really real, a hypnotist can hypnotize someone and suggest that they're going to see things which are not as they are. Stage hypnotists might give someone the suggestion that by picking up a bar of chocolate and saying, "Oh, it's your mother wants to speak to you on the phone," and handing it to a person. And then he would stand there talking to his bar of chocolate as though he was having and thinking he was having a conversation with his mother. So that's a case where the brain is actually showing you what it expects to show you, whereas actually it's been fooled into expecting the wrong thing. So it's a bit ambiguous as to whether it's all real out there and this is just a distorted, compressed model, or whether there's a different relationship between the inner and the outer, maybe going both ways, or even only going outwards. Now, this is why I want to look at the boundary between inner and outer a bit more closely. Let's get back to this picture. Now we now know that we mustn't say this is a picture of Martin Escher holding a ball, because it isn't. So is it more accurate to say this is a picture of a mirror ball in which we see a distorted image of Martin Escher holding it? Surely that's a better description. But it's also false, because you can't actually see the mirror ball. Now, if that statement seems a bit outrageous, I'm going to quote from Friedrich Nietzsche, the Dawn of Day, where he's talking about a mirror, and he says, "When we try to examine the mirror in itself, we eventually detect nothing but the things reflected in it. When we wish to grasp the things reflected, we touch nothing but the mirror. This is the general history of knowledge." You see, we don't actually see a mirror ball there. What we see is an image which is distorted in the way it would be if there was a mirror ball there. And therefore we assume we're seeing a mirror ball. Now, I think it would be possible if you just took a straight photo of that room and you use Photoshop, something like sort of fisheye lens or some transformation to fake the curvature as though it was being seen in a mirror ball without there being a mirror ball there. We only assume it's there because of the way it looks. Now that's very strange, isn't it? What is this surface which divides the inner distorted picture from the outer real picture? Now, we're told that we live in a world of real, objective, solid objects. And those objects are solid because they're made up of atoms and molecules and can be measured. So if we take the colour green, it's got objective reality because you can buy a green pencil, you can buy green paint, things like that. And that's objective, people agree with it. It says green on the tin. But the experience of greenness is more subjective because, for example, I'm red-green colourblind, so the way I experience green is different from the way my wife does. So whereas on the one hand you've got something which you can almost define in terms of a range of frequencies of light, on the other hand the experience of it, which we call the word green, is subjective. Now what about the surface of that sphere? Well, I'm going to go to the surface of a lake because it's a bit easier to explain. The most vivid thing about a lake really is its surface. Either it's all choppy and all that thing, or it's flat and smooth and reflecting the sky, which is a lovely thing. But what is the surface made of if it's a real thing? Is it made of water molecules? No, because then it would be the lake. Is it made of air molecules? No, because then it would be the air above the lake. The surface itself is neither of those things. It's just a boundary between those two parts, the lake and the air. Well, if it's a real objective thing, what is it made of? What molecules? Could I buy a bottle of lake surface and then spread it out wherever I want it and have a surface of a lake? No, because it's a two-dimensional concept in a three-dimensional world where real things are three-dimensional. It's really then a sort of subjective belief. It's what we posit to lie between air and water is the surface. So what about this mirror ball? That mirror finish that you can't actually see, but it's the only thing you can touch, is just a surface. The difference between the inner and the outer, both of which are very clear and understandable, is a two-dimensional thing which in a sense has no existence. It's just a thought. What lies between the inner and the outer? And that's the thing that we're trying to explore. At what point, where's the real difference between something objective out there, which is agreed, and something in here, which is just my belief or my thought, or even my dream? If I come up with some imagined theory and I try to express it, how many likes or books sold or academic recognition, how much do I need to make me feel that I have found a truth, an objective truth? So what I want to do in the next video is I'm going to sort of explore a meditation based on this ambiguity, to go between the inner and outer in an exploratory way, to see whether we come out feeling a bit clearer about it or whether we're just more confused. It's an experiment, and I'm going to follow it up afterwards with a review of what we might find.